We'll go ahead and we will call the Sustainability Advisory Commission meeting for October 4th to order. Will staff please call the roll?
Tomas Delgado, Stacy Gloss,
Here.
Jessica Lemkool, Andrew Stump,
Here.
Morgan White,
Here.
Grace Wilkin,
Here.
Luke Westalker.
Here.
Great, we have a quorum. We will proceed. I don't think that we had in our packet for this meeting is the minutes from last month from September, so we'll continue with that at the next scheduled meeting. Okay. Are there any additions to the agenda?
We have the one change, right?
We have one change in that this evening, the household hazardous waste presentation by Susan Monty is going to be held for a different meeting. She wasn't able to make it tonight. Any other changes? All righty. So moving right along, we will move right into the staff report. Scott?
Good evening, Commission. We have some updates. Geothermal Urbana-Champaign has 14 contracts signed for 58 tons of capacity. Our next price decline benchmark would be 76 tons. We're working towards closing the program at the end of October. So not sure if we'll get to 76 tons, but that's the next goal. Last year we had 15 contracts. I don't remember exactly how many tons, but real close to this. So I'd love to get to 15 or 16 contracts and have another strong year like last year. Municipal electric aggregation at the time of publishing, go ahead.
Sorry, is it possible still to get another Geo Power Hour scheduled if we had someone who wanted to host one?
We
Or
have
is it too late?
we have a geothermal power hour scheduled for October 12th. I believe it's 6 p.m. by Zoom.
Yeah, I'm asking if it would be possible to do another one or if that's not an option right now.
Potentially.
And who's hosting them, you or somebody else?
I'm
I
arranging
don't
them
know.
with the Geothermal Alliance of Illinois.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, so reach out to me and we'll talk
Mhm.
about it. At the time of publishing this report, we were planning to go to bid day to market for a new municipal electric aggregation supply contract on Monday. That was yesterday, right? It's been a long week already. We did, in fact, execute a new supply agreement. We were able to create a very, very small margin of savings for our ratepayers as compared to the published Ameren regulated, basic electric supply rate. It's very, very small. I don't have all the details in front of me. I haven't actually seen the final contract yet. But we're going to have a tiny amount of savings. But what our ratepayers may not know about, and we're going to do some communications in the next 2 months about this, but what our ratepayers may not know is they've been enjoying hundreds of thousands of dollars a month of savings because we've locked in several years ago to a low electricity supply rate, and the rest of the market and the Ameren rate has been at 10 and is now going to 12 cents a kilowatt hour. We're at 4.5. Our ratepayers are at 4.5 right now. So I think June was the most recent month I had data for, and it was $500,000 of savings in June alone. The market is up, and there's nothing we can do about that. The Ameren regulated price is up, and there's nothing we can do about that. But we have been able to create a small margin of savings. We're going to be doing some communications. Our contract doesn't actually start till the February meter read. In order to get a price that could beat the price to compare, we had to forego December and January. So ratepayers will be put on Ameren basic generation service, just a regular Ameren regulated rate for 2 months, and then they'll get an opt-out letter, and they'll be seamlessly moved back onto our municipal electric aggregation program. And of course, everyone can opt out. So I'll take any questions if there's any on that.
Yeah, Grace, go ahead.
Thanks for the update. I had some questions about the municipal one. Is that locked in rate for a certain amount of time?
It's a 22-month contract from February.
Okay, so probably over time, if Ameren rates go up and we're locked in, there's gonna be more savings at the end of the
Right.
contract, right?
Right, correct. It used to be, in the good old days, Ameren published one electricity rate, flat rate, for 12 months, and then they'd publish another one for 12 months. They've been restating and restating their price over and over again. Those days are gone, at least for the time being. So, they could restate their price before our contract even starts. They could restate it come July of next year. So, yeah, it's dynamic.
And we talked about before, were you still considering the possibility of doing an opt-in letter also?
Everyone's gonna get a letter, and they can. The letter's gonna say, we're gonna enroll you if you'd like to do something different, meaning be on Ameren Supply or another third-party retail electric supplier. Then you can opt out.
Even for the people who aren't currently on the municipal aggregate?
So everyone's gonna get that letter. I think the only exception would be, and I'm gonna make a note to double check this with the vendor. The only exception would be accounts that are already in a term contract for electric supply with some other third-party electric supplier. Our program doesn't rip them out of that contract. That continues on. I presume they won't get a letter because the letter says we're enrolling you, and you can opt out if you like. But for those accounts, we're not enrolling them. They already have a contract. That's all adjudicated behind the scenes in Ameren's system.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure those accounts will not get an opt-out letter. Now, I think what you're getting at maybe is, could we send them a letter that says, when your contract's up, you can enroll? That's an interesting question.
Because like I mentioned before, like in my example, I got some other, alternative green energy source through another company without really knowing or understanding the municipal aggregate years and years ago. And they just keep renewing my contract every year. And it's like, I want to switch, but it's just the timing. And so I think it might be helpful, even if it's not a letter to each household, just kind of publicity wide, making sure that people know that this option is
Yeah.
available, that it can save money, and that it's coming from renewable energy credits, so contributing back environmentally, because I think that is an important piece for people to know. And if someone wanted to join now, because the one's ending now, right? So say if someone wanted to switch now, what about this in-between period? Is that what you were saying, where they'd be on Ameren's and then switch when this starts?
So when our contract ends with the December meter read, if account holders take no action, their account will go into Ameren Basic Generation Service, Ameren Residential Supply, and it's going to be 12 cents. At that moment, they're going to get a letter from Ameren that says your electric supply agreement or service is ending, and you have options. You can enroll to Ameren, or you will be enrolled in Ameren, or you can get some other third-party electric supply contract. At that around about that same time, we're going to send our opt-out letter. We're going to send it right away, as soon as we can, to that time frame, so that folks have some anticipation that I don't necessarily need to take any action, because come February, I'll be enrolled in Urbana's aggregation. So that's our sequence of events.
So if someone's on just the regular Ameren one, they're not locked into
No.
another year or something?
No.
Right? Okay. Thank you.
Do you know if all new connections are automatically put onto the Urbana aggregation program?
There's some cycle of sweeping through the data and catching people who either are a new account or came off of a third-party electric supply agreement and are back on Ameren. There's a sweep, and I don't know the frequency. I can look into that. But they go through and they send out opt-out letters to all those accounts.
All right, any other questions about municipal aggregation?
Yes.
Go ahead, Morgan.
So did you confirm that it's all got renewable energy certificates associated, or is that something you still have to find out for sure?
We could not do that and create some margin of savings, or even if we
Mhm.
matched, if our final price matched the Ameren price to compare, we still would not be able to buy 100% RECs for all
Do
the
you know
consumption.
how much it is, if any?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
We're getting pricing for the RECs. What we've done is we've taken the supply price that we could get from the vendor, the consultant fee, we zeroed out the city fee,
Okay.
which we had cut in half in the previous contract to make space
Mhm.
for savings for residents. And then that difference between what the price was at that moment and the Ameren price to compare, we took a portion of that and we're going to buy whatever RECs we can with that amount, and then we left a remainder as a little bit of savings, $3 or $4 or $5 a month bill savings for residents. So I don't know what the percentage will be. We'll get there, but
Yeah, it'll be some portion. It'll be
Yeah.
partially green.
correct.
What about the people, this is just thinking about how the opt-in, opt-out stuff works. People who opted out the first time around, will they need to do that again because there will be it won't be continual?
Yes.
Okay, so if
There's
someone
no-
does want to opt out, they would need to opt out. But
Correct.
Don't
There's
think it already
no-
happened.
Correct. There is
People
no
of the
permanent
world.
opt-out.
So, but there's still benefits, right? Because there's a component of clean energy through this. There's the slim savings, which is really important. There's the locking it in for multiple years while Ameren keeps changing things. There's lots of good reasons to
Yeah.
do it. And hopefully in the future, the city will be able to go back to renewable 100% in the municipal aggregation next time.
Yeah.
Especially because the renewable energy certificate prices are like way higher than they were in the
They-
past. At one point, we could get them for a quarter, like 25 cents. And then they spiked as high locally as $7. And the last I had checked, they were $3. So that's all part of the story.
Yeah. It's become more interesting.
I'm sorry, I was just thinking, maybe last comment on this, and I don't know if it's a question or not. So I heard you say that the program would run for 22 months,
Mhm.
starting in February. My understanding is that when municipal aggregation contracts were completed in the past, that they were for a longer frame of time. So, or were they always on a 2-year time frame?
We've had 2-year, 3-year. We've had interruptions in the 3-year where we agreed to extend it, but for a lower price because the market had moved. So it's, very rarely do you see 6-month. 3-year is, I think, the longest I've heard of. So the 2 years is kind of where they tend to be, around about there.
Okay, and yeah, and like other folks are saying here, I think it's an interesting time as we see more of the effects of the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act in Illinois, as we see more renewables coming online locally. If that's getting supported, then these are all sort of things that are fluctuating and changing in the energy market all the time currently, and at a very fast pace right now. Okay, thank you.
With respect to Solar Urbana-Champaign, we have 36 contracts for 358 kilowatts of capacity. That program is going very well with the new vendor to our program, GRNE. There's an error here. The next Sustainability Advisory Commission meeting will be December, well, the first Tuesday of December. No meeting in November.
When does the Solar Urbana-Champaign program wrap up?
I think we're closing contracts October 31st as well.
Okay, any ideas at this point if they'll be continuing a program into the next year?
It's hard to say. We'll have to evaluate when it's over.
358 kilowatts of capacity and 36 contracts looks impressive. How does this compare to years past?
I think we've had 2 years that were higher than where we're at right now, where it's not finished yet. The first year is a bit of an aberration because the program had never been done in this area, and we benefited from a whole lot of pent-up demand. The first year, we had 705 kilowatts of capacity sold. I don't think we'll ever get back there, although, solar is a great deal when electricity prices are at 12 cents a kilowatt hour. I mean, it's quite a comparison.
Any other questions on the staff report?
I had a comment that the news report for the geothermal, my colleague in North Carolina saw it, so.
Oh, wow. Great. Yeah, they took our more detailed program graphic, and they blew it up on the entire green screen in their studio at, I think it was WCIA. I mean, just couldn't ask for better coverage than that. So that was really good. We got a write-up in the News Gazette on the community solar recently as well.
That's great. It sounds like there's really good press lately. All right, anything else on the staff report?
Oh, I want to mention the Landscape Recycling Center went live today with a new electronic point of sale system, so cash register. It's a big transition for the LRC, which was using a lot of old equipment and carbon copy, triplicate forms and that sort of thing. So it's a modern, detailed receipt. We're also collecting sales tax for the state of Illinois now, so that's a change as well. I was out this morning, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. So it's a bit of the in-the-weeds bureaucratic consideration, but it's been a long time coming, and I'm excited for it.
Good deal. Okay, so I think what we'll do now is turn to the fire station sustainability agenda item. In folks' packet, so I understand that there was a discussion last month regarding sustainability recommendations or potential sustainability recommendations to pass along to the city council and the mayor's office regarding planning for the Urbana Fire Station rebuilds or new construction. In your packet this evening, there is a draft resolution to recommend the mayor and city council direct resources to net zero energy design for the Urbana Fire Station new construction project. We have a half hour on the agenda to discuss this topic. I might open it by asking for there to start by seeing if there's any discussion on the resolution as was presented, and Scott is going to bring it up for all to see. I guess while we're waiting for that, what I had received was the synopsis of good, better, and best sort of recommendations coming forth from the SAC for this, and I took that feedback and information and worked to put it into a resolution format where we have all the whereases and the recommendations, and hopefully captured the spirit of that discussion that gets the project in the kind of baseline or good category, the baseline standards of what we're looking for this building from the SAC, or supporting from the SAC would be for some baseline items. So we'll get that up shortly. The resolution, please.
I had some initial thoughts or questions.
Sure.
I think, overall got a lot of the points. I think one I didn't see in here was, because I think it wasn't on the original list, but it was in the conversation about other uses of space, like for playground or community garden or native habitat. And so I think that one didn't get in here, and I don't know if we want it to. And then I'm not familiar with some of these other standards. So would be interested in more information on those. And I was also thinking that whatever we recommend, like what I sent in some of the attachments to Scott was like the lead scorecard for new building construction, even just the one-page score sheet, so you can see the breakdown of what do we mean by that on every piece of it. So I would encourage us to do something like that as, you know, just a reference or an attachment. What does the standard mean and what we're talking about?
Sorry, I don't have a pen and paper in front of me, and I should have just taken some notes. So I feel like I'd like to sort of address one at a time, and then also if we need to pull up a draft version of the resolution in order to accept it with modifications, for us to discuss those modifications at the time. So let me see if I can turn this back into a Word document.
Maybe while you're doing that, I'd like to comment. Grace, you said something about if we want to incorporate the conversation about the open space, the green space, and I think that's really important. We need to make sure that that is included. It was, I know that, that Jessica in particular was talking about it as well last time, so I believe that she would support that even though she can't be here. Can't remember everybody, but we all were talking about it because it's quite a bit of acreage. And the building shouldn't take up the whole space. It very likely won't on either of the two locations. And both of them are opportunities to create a community space. And part of resiliency to climate change is building that community, and part of post-pandemic, just survival, recovery is to have these places where people can interact and especially children who for a few years may not have been out in public and need opportunities. I just think that there's a huge opportunity for that space. And it doesn't necessarily have to be included in the original building. It could be phased in later. It could be a community-built location if that's, legally able to happen. But it needs to be incorporated in the design to allow for it.
Okay, I think that is great feedback, given the conversation that was had at the last meeting, so I didn't have exactly that context. What I would, I don't know that it's a proposal right now, but one of the things that I could add in is a 5th section into
Could
this
you turn-
document.
Did you turn on track changes after you have that? I
So
was
I-
making the edits.
I copy and pasted this from
You
a
are.
PDF. I had intended to send you all in the packet the Word version so you could track changes in anticipation of the meeting, and I see that I sent you a PDF instead. And I also don't have the Word version with me, so I'm just trying to recreate it here for our purposes.
Sorry, I thought Stacy was driving that screen that was in front of
I'm,
me.
I'm not. But I do have something where I can do track changes on the document, so maybe Scott can do it on the screen that's in control, and I can work it from here or something.
I can.
Okay.
I'm trying to just get the formatting a little bit
Okay,
more
so while
readable.
Scott's working on the formatting, I'd like to move ahead and work on the language here, and what I would suggest adding, and Morgan, if you could sort of just I guess in bullet point phrases, what we have is section 5, the Sustainability Advisory Commission recommends consideration of additional green building design and certification features. So I want to change that to not consideration of additional, but consideration of site design.
No, I would just add the, green building and site design in the intro sentence for section 4,
Okay.
and site. It looks
In
like it's on-
memo, there is a bullet point that's worded as consider
said
the
design.
shared use of the rest of the land area,
Mhm.
parentheses for community gardens, playground, native habitat, et cetera.
And yeah, that's what I was thinking too, is just that, add that bullet.
Grace, can you read that back to me?
Yes, consider the shared use of the rest of the land area
Okay.
For community gardens, playground, native habitat, et cetera. And it's just the last bullet point in the memo too, if it's easier to copy from there.
Okay. So what we have
Oh.
here is, go on, sorry, Scott.
I was gonna say, I said, oh, let me go grab it from the menu, or from the memo.
I think that you had it there just by putting in playground, native habitat, et cetera, but this works too.
And I
Okay.
just want clarity, would we be giving them the memo as well, or just the resolution? I mean, they can look up the memo, but I thought the memo's for us, for our conversation, right? And then the resolution is
That's
what
how
we
I
send?
was viewing
That
it.
was my understanding.
I mean, they'll get the memo, right, and read that, and I think my perspective on council, a lot of times the memo is a really important part, you know, the resolution is the binding one that really counts, but the memo is where you explain all of the reasoning and everything behind it for the people who are asked to make a decision about it.
Okay, just as far as edits go, I think that you have a dash instead of a bullet point.
Yeah,
I'm
I will,
sorry.
I will clean up all the formatting,
So,
at a later date, but
okay, so if we approve it and then we clean up the formatting, it's okay, and I can come in and sign
if
it?
you're okay with it, I'm okay with it.
Okay, all right. There was a question on these additional design certification features. So there are many, like, this gets into, there are many different building certifications that, that can ensure that a building is built better, more sustainably, and more resilient, you know, over or more than just standard construction. And in terms of each different certification, there are certainly, there's benefits over different certifications than others, and they can get so far. So like net zero specification, for example, might just be looking at energy specifically. Is the building making, or the structure or the site making at least as much energy as it's using the way that it's built? And it might not take into other green standards or green certifications, but it is certainly one to look at from an energy standpoint. LEED Silver and LEED Gold project certifications, LEED being the leadership in energy and
Energy.
environment design, or leadership in environment
It's
and
leadership in energy and environmental design.
Focuses a lot on building sustainability, both the structure itself, the materials that go into it, then also the site. And the projects that are LEED built, they can become LEED Silver, Gold. I don't know if there's a LEED Platinum.
There's certified silver, gold, and platinum,
Okay, great.
and net zero.
And
above
a net
platinum.
zero.
Mhm.
Okay. That all, you know, are based on checklists. Morgan, I know that you know a lot about this, are certainly based on checklists, and Morgan, we know a lot about how you can check different boxes to get different sets of points. A lot of buildings, so I guess in the energy space, and I work a lot with energy efficiency and renewable energy space in particular, there are buildings that are built to LEED standards that do not perform better on energy necessarily than other buildings that do not have a LEED standard on them. And so if we're looking at a building that, you know, is LEED certified, but we don't specify to the developer that energy is a major priority and we need that to check the boxes here, you may not end up with a building that's necessarily better on performance than others. LEED is a great name. It gets a lot of recognition, and a lot of people would recognize LEED as a standard and something to be able to say from the city, right, that we support sustainability. We are going this extra step to achieve this, certain milestone. So anyway, so that one's great. There's a ton of brand recognition with it throughout the United States. I can address passive house. Passive house design is not just for residential buildings. They can be for commercial buildings and multifamily as well. There is a standard. I would say that in terms of a standard on energy performance and indoor air quality for buildings, passive house is, in my mind, one of the strongest, if not the strongest, standards in existence. It ensures that the building is using extremely low energy, and its building practices are using construction methods that are extremely, the envelope is extremely tight, and then brings in mechanical ventilation and other mechanicals to ensure that the air quality is healthy for occupants while also removing contaminants from the building. So when it comes to an energy standard, a performance standard, passive house is definitely possible for commercial buildings, and it is an excellent standard that is out there. Another one that was on here, resilient construction design, and I didn't lump it in with the others because it's a little bit different than just net zero or extremely high-performing buildings in terms of the energy performance. Fortified is a standard that's been developed, that's recognized by the insurance community, that is focused a lot on how to fortify a structure against extreme weather scenarios. So with the fortified construction, for example, they pay a lot of attention to how is the roof connected to the building? Is it going to be able to withstand a tornado? Can it withstand a hurricane? There are a lot of examples of construction to these fortified standards that, especially in the South, with extreme weather and extreme storms, that these buildings perform extremely well under the elements that they are exposed to. So again, it may not be focused so much on energy or green building materials per se, but is about how the whole building system is designed to be able to withstand extreme standards. And I think that I added it here because I think that for a fire station in particular, or a building in a community that would benefit from not having interrupted service, that would benefit from being able to be have continuous operations as needed from a public safety and public service standpoint, that the fortified building is something to look at. Insurance agencies also charge less on building insurance for these buildings.
Stacy, on that fortified
Yeah.
standard, so I hadn't heard of that before. It's interesting, and I think it ties well to the conversations we've been having about resilience, because one of the I remember that we talked about, but we hadn't taken any action on over the last 4 years, was the need to have shelters when there is a catastrophe for our community of some kind, a physical infrastructure problem. And so if these fire stations can serve as, gathering spaces in the case of, extreme heat, extreme cold, more tornadoes and dirigibles, the thing where the trees all fell down a few years ago. Derecho, I think.
Oh, a derecho.
Derecho, you
There
said
you
it.
go.
But that's an interesting point. I think it's really a good point.
So Grace, that was kind of an explanation of those programs, and my rationale for including them wasn't to make any sort of value judgment over which one is necessarily the best or recommended, but for the city to take a look at those and decide what is going to be the appropriate use case, the appropriate use for a green building certification or standard for this building, and to bring it up with developers, what can they build to, what are they willing to build to, Do they build other buildings to these standards? I think that just having, I don't know, if you put out an RFP, and I don't know that that's exactly the mechanism, but if there's an RFP for builders and it's specified passive house, not all builders build to passive house standards. And I don't think all builders are necessarily interested in saying, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and figure out something totally new here in order to meet this particular standard. I think that developers that build to passive house, for example, are going to be the ones that respond to that RFP. So hopefully the city can decide if it does want a certification or a standard for energy or building performance, that they select one and go with a developer that has that particular line of experience.
Under section 4, I'm wondering if we can add some more explanation for those things, such as for like the second bullet point, like just some sort of design that's taking into account like sustainable scoring, and then for the resilient construction design, put a little bit of that explanation in for some people reading this.
Is it possible to put footnotes and links and stuff like that in a resolution?
Yeah, I'd be happy to like sort of attach this information as attachments for further reading that can go along with that memo.
Yeah, I think more information would be good because, I mean, unless someone knows what passive house and fortified or any of these are, you know, they're just random words that don't have a meaning. So I think that that would definitely be helpful. It seems like I definitely understand having the flexibility of a few options of, you know, scores or rating or certification systems that we recommend. I'm not familiar with the other one, so I don't really know to recommend them, but I don't have a problem with them off the bat, but I don't really know what I'm recommending besides LEED. So I think more information would be good. So I agree with the flexibility. I think there's also some extent too where it also makes sense to keep things simple sometimes too, that, you know, the city's asking us as the experts and the people of interest in this area. The architect's already selected. I don't know about developer-wise or if that's already lined up. So I think some flexibility, and then I think also some simplicity and clearness in providing all the information is also helpful.
I think that a really important question, going back to the architect, since you're saying that an architect is selected, is what of these standards is the architect familiar with and what have they built to in terms of these standards before? I don't know that the city is going to go back to the drawing board and say, well, the architect didn't know about passive house, so he's fired.
I think that it's flexible in there. The architect is selected and that there's room for things in there. I agree that LEED isn't the most, you know, as far as energy-wise, and so I feel like we kind of added to it, though, that we were like, this LEED standard without even certification, plus geothermal, plus these other things. So I don't know. I can see both. I could see reasons for leaving some options and for having more streamlined recommendations, or maybe a disclaimer like bullet point 2, say, you know, some green building, you know, system or rating system such as these options.
Okay, so I think that to add here in bullet point 2, green building rating systems such as, and then those bullet points.
Yeah, and I like the bullet point here. I think it makes sense because in the resolution, we want to keep it a little simpler. But I think we are also in this, in some ways, we're losing that good, better, best, or baseline versus more recommendation here, like saying LEED silver, gold certification. I think the memo is helpful in clarifying, you know, kind of what we mean by that. But I feel like that got a little lost in this one.
I think that the section 4 is the also consider, but if you scroll up a little bit, Scott, section 3 and 2 are like, make sure you include solar, make sure you include geothermal, and make sure you account for the health of the people. And so does that sort of get to what you were talking about in terms of
Yeah, I just don't
the base
agree.
and then the additional?
I don't think that's how we kind of had it before. Like, So for example, we're saying we recommend these things, but not necessarily LEED or any other green building thing or shared space. So I agree, it kind of reads like 1 through 3 are the main things and 4 is kind of additional, but I don't think that's the way we originally had it in our list.
Would you just want to move lead then to another section, or do you think other things should be their own section?
I think they're all of equal weight here. I think it's just like we laid out last month was the level at which you go, you know, green building design from meeting requirements and not being officially registered versus getting officially registered. And it doesn't mean necessarily like, oh, take that as, you know, an additional thing. It's just, here's what we recommend, and you can go different depths within it.
Is it possible to actually just put our chart into the resolution? The city, you know, strive to, or we resolve from us that the city include all the items in under basic sustainability, and we strongly encourage the enhanced sustainability, and it would be great if you did optimal. That kind of thing.
Grace, do you recall the specific words being used for the 3 categories at City Council? It isn't these exactly.
It's essential, enhanced, and amplified, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But that was another point I wanted to talk to people about, because I would be in favor of not calling ours those words at all, to completely avoid using those words. Because for me, and I would love to not be just me, you know, as full SAC input on this, that I think this is regardless of whatever design, whether the city builds a $5 million station or a $10 million station, that these are still the recommendations regardless. And my concerns are that if we call it that, then it can be the misunderstanding of saying, well, only if you build the $10 million one, then do these things, as opposed to whatever design. Do you guys have agreement or disagreement
Well,
on that?
I guess so. I kind of have a question. If this is called basic, enhanced, and optimal, and I don't know all the words that were being used, but I guess like by categorizing this into these 3 different categories, I'm just imagining that these are the things that are sort of getting mapped onto the same map or structure that City Council has, and I have absolutely no idea how, again, not being in the City Council meetings and not knowing what all of the public input is, I don't know what ends up getting lumped into each sort of category from community input and from other recommendations, and maybe where other recommendations are coming from. For example, I saw something that went out on a community listserv from a City Council member in my district that said that they were seeking public input on the fire station, and that they were looking for good, better, and best, and were asking for residents and community members to go ahead and provide input or comment on that. From ours, I'm wondering, does this basic, enhanced, and optimal just does it just get mapped on, or are we able to say, which is something that I'm really interested in doing, which is saying, here's like the minimum that like no matter what is decided, these are the building elements that are a kind of a must from a Sustainability Advisory Commission recommendation standpoint, and that must is your geothermal heating, your solar ready, and in the basic. Everything else is just for me a please consider if you have the budget for it, and depending on what what commitment that the city wants to signify that they're going for.
I think there's 2 questions that are being discussed kind of at the same time here, though. One is just what's the format and terminology about what we're saying, and the other is what are we saying about, and I from what you were talking about, Grace, I think you were talking about the LEED in particular being, and that it's, so personally, I'm okay with LEED being it's not a must, it'd be nice. Whether it's LEED certified or even the scorecard. maybe the must is not that it gets the score worth being certified, but just they give us their best version of the scorecard so that there is something to compare to other places that do this sort of stuff. So the first three under basic on the memo on the screen here, those are the ones that I think of as must. And I would add, instead of consider the shared use, set aside portion of the land for shared community use of some kind. And that would be in the must, presuming there's 5 acres. And then everything else. So then those must items, if we put it in the resolution form, that takes away the thing that you were talking about the terminology and having it act like Stacey, you're talking about it mapping to that good, better, best, or whatever terms you guys were talking about before. But Grace was talking about it. What I heard was, it's not a good idea to map to that exactly, because then, we might lose some of the components. And so I like the idea of the concept of, here's what, as your sustainability advisors, we truly, truly believe you must include. And if you don't, then you're just lying to everybody about your sustainability goals for the community. That's my opinion. And then here are the things that you ought to try to bring into the project. What do you guys think of that?
I think, Grace, you're getting at, maybe they decide that the medium category that they pick for the fire station could actually have the optimal sustainability if they don't map it directly one to one. So you actually could choose a different one from their category on the fire station in overall.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense too, because in a sense, our options, and also we're talking about 2 fire stations, so I think also with the lander to consider that one on Philo has a very big lot and the other one on Lincoln does not have a lot of extra space. And so, I just lost the question in response. You were saying, oh yeah, so that goes from like 5 to 7 or 8 to $10 million per station are kind of the 3 options of general design that have been presented. And it's not set in stone, and we'll probably piecemeal. I doubt that we're gonna pick just one of those. I think we're gonna piecemeal, a la carte, different stuff there. But for example, if we spend $5 million on a cheaper option instead of $10 million for the more expensive building, that actually, I think, gives more opportunity to do the more enhanced sustainability on a cheaper building. So I think that's why, I'm suggesting that we put that in the memo, that it's not tied to whatever design, kind of regardless of whatever overall building design or cost comes up with. This is still our basic sustainability, we think, is like the bare minimum, and then another option, and then the optimal if you want to go all out.
I think a lot of this is making sense to me for the most part, but it sounds like where a lot of our discussion is focusing is on actually changing this memo itself, and that this memo needs some work here, or explanation and additional information to it. I wasn't actually prepared to do anything with the memo specifically tonight, and so I'm wondering what I guess what would need to happen for us to make sure that the memo was ready for sharing, and that we were comfortable with that. And then I guess there's this question of what to do with the resolution.
So I did write up some draft of this in the memo format that Scott has. I just re-forwarded you that email if you were interested in taking a peek-see at that. Just if you're interested in some draft language to work on or look at for tonight. I agree, yeah, we're getting a little into the memo, which I do think is important because it helps to understand what we're saying in the resolution, and that is part of, the record and all that stuff. But yeah, the resolution's the real important one, and I think it's relevant in a sense to figure out, get on the same page as far as ideas and terms we're talking about so that we can fit that in the resolution, kind of with, are we talking about basic and optimal and all that?
Can we can we focus in on what is the bare minimum that we really believe they must include?
Yes, to my understanding, that was what we had already decided in like the basic sustainability column. And
So-
I'd say that everything is kind of up for availability of resources and expertise, you know, just because we say it's a must, there's gonna be flexibility as far as logistics and what's realistic for them.
So the one thing that I would just like to add to that, and again, I was ill at the last meeting and so didn't have the chance to weigh in here. I agree completely with everything that's in this basic sustainability category, except for one thing. So I support the geothermal, the solar ready, EV infrastructure, as well as, you know, considering shared use of the space or making some part of, you know, where there is space to make sure that we're paying attention to native habitats and shared use for the community, setting it aside in some way. I don't love the lead scoring I understand conceptually that it may be useful to have some sort of score, maybe, but I really don't agree with having under a basic to really even ask for it, unless we were going to say, you know what, this building actually should be certified as something like that. I don't know how much attention is actually paid to the scoring or the scoring system in the course of the build as part of its design, if you're not actually saying to go ahead and do something to a particular standard. I don't know how much expense it really adds to add registering a project to the lead register. And if that's really significant in terms of already spending $5 million or $10 million on a building, is it really prohibitive to be, you know, to achieve a lead score? I don't believe personally that it is.
It is notable. It is a notable cost. I can't quote the amounts, but you have to have a LEED certified designer involved, and there are steps and paperwork. There's documentation, and there's quite a bit of time involvement, which are all going to be charged at the architect engineer's fee rate, or their sub-consultant for the LEED sub-consultant, 2 or 3 meetings, and then the discussions about how do you get these things done, how do you get enough points to get certified. It's not negligible.
So the certification fees are like between $150 and $175 for the certification.
So for LEED certification is for a human being. So that's $150 for a human to go and take the test to become LEED certified. A building is registered, right? And feel free to remind me, it's been a few years since doing their certification as a human. Buildings get registered and humans get certified. So that's the cost for someone to take a test and for a person to get certified. To get a building registered, I don't know the exact amount either, but we're talking about thousands of dollars. And I think that, from my knowledge, it's not harmful to go through and, what ultimately matters is the building itself and its design and functionality, regardless of whether you pay to have it officially registered. I agree that, if you say we're going to do it without registering, and then that means that we don't actually follow through with the design plans, then that doesn't make sense. But I think it does make sense to build in these principles and to incorporate, all the ideas without paying the extra money for an official registration. I think that's not uncommon.
I think my argument is that if you're going to go through having all of these factors be built into the design, and that you're going to work with somebody who is a LEED certified designer for your building and go through the motions of having that credential in order to get where you want to go, to even be able to check the boxes at the end, I would just register the building.
I think that makes sense too. I think, what we were saying from last meeting was that, the bare minimum would be to follow all of these principles and not get registered. And then enhanced or optimal would be, sure, go ahead and get it registered.
I understand, and what I was proposing is that our basic would actually change from basic to lead scoring, achieving the silver, kind of the one that was in the middle, rather than just the score sheet.
There's
And
a
then in the
middle-
middle be like a silver or,
There's another,
Gold or
there's another
platinum.
choice, it's a step between the two that are shown on this memo in basic and enhanced, which is get LEED certified. So the building can be LEED certified, or it can be LEED silver, or LEED gold, or LEED platinum, or LEED net zero. So it can be LEED certified, but not silver. It's below silver.
is that, no, really, that's actually something I didn't know. I thought
Yes,
when you were
yes, there are
saying that you were
many-
LEED
there are m-
certified, that you were like
At least
at
silver.
what the minimum certification is.
No. Well, I'm saying that when you get LEED certified, you get different levels. You can be LEED at different levels for your building. And the state of Illinois requires all state facilities to be at least LEED silver, which is why the university has like 10% of our space is now at least LEED silver.
Does that not apply to municipal buildings?
We are not, the city is not part of the state. It's not a state entity, it's a home rule, right? Is that the phrase? And, but the LEED silver designation, like to register the project and achieve LEED silver, is not the first step. The first step is just to achieve LEED certified, period.
Okay, I
that make
was
sense?
really confused by LEED scoring without paying. I understood that to mean something different, so I would like to change that language.
I brought that up because one of the things that you can do is you can make decisions about your building while looking at the LEED certification program. So you say, oh, LEED certified requires that we have this many bike racks for a building of this size with this occupancy. And then you choose to have that many bike racks. And that doesn't mean that you're going through the process, but you're using the information in the LEED system to help guide your thinking. And so there are buildings that are designed to LEED standards without going through the LEED certification process. That's what that concept is. And it's nice if you then have the list at the end that whoever was doing it, like, oh, I got this one in my own mind. I didn't go through the approval certification process with the U.S. Green Building Council, but I cared about it. And I can say, here's what I did and didn't do.
Okay, I feel like this is like us being too smart and really knowing how these programs work, but that
No,
to
you can't
the,
be too
I
smart.
think this is us being a little too smart. I really object to without the paying for registration part. I would like to see in basic sustainability that you have a LEED certified building. Enhanced can be at LEED silver, optimal LEED gold.
I think we're trying to get at that if the city decided not to have a LEED certified building, this would be the next option. That it would not be LEED certified, but it would follow the steps to get LEED certified. I think that was where we're coming from. We were going the very basic.
No, I know, I understand it.
Yeah.
I just don't think that architects and developers work that way.
I can believe that. But I would say that you're confusing me, Stacey, because you earlier said, you don't see LEED as being an optimal thing. So would you really say that the very basic, like the bare minimum for this building needs to include LEED certification?
No,
I want-
personally, I would leave it out, but I will accept it as this list
Okay,
if it
'cause-
doesn't say
'cause
as not
I-
paid for.
I think it's more important if we're going to be advocating for one thing, like if they're only going to do one thing, it needs to be the geothermal, not the LEED certification.
Well, that I agree with as well.
And so therefore, I would say have be LEED certified. Maybe it doesn't say silver, just certified, and maybe we could write hopefully silver, right? And as a secondary thing, but the very basic is geothermal, and actually having geothermal exchange, and then being solar and EV ready.
Is there a ton of difference between enhanced and optimal? Could we just have like a basic and then an enhanced? Because I like a lot of that difference seems pretty negligible.
I think that's a good point.
I think either way, I could see the point. Yeah, they're not very different. There's a little bit about community charging on optimal and battery and solar ready versus installed. So, I mean, I think we could. I also don't see a problem with keeping it as is. For the lead one, I'm still in favor of saying not having to pay for registration. That's not my recommendation, that the minimum would be that you'd have to pay for it. And I would recommend that if we include LEED or whatever rating systems we include, that we have some information. And some of the other stuff I sent you on an email, Scott, is, has like the Excel sheet that's got the one-page breakdown of the score sheet. That's fine.
I can't pull it up here,
Okay.
'cause this is separate Fence Road.
That's fine. And then just real quick on LEED, so it's out of 110 points to get to a certified is the minimum level is 40 to 49 points. Silver is 50 to 59. Gold is 60 to 79. And platinum is 80 to 110. And I think those are just numbers unless you're looking at the scorecard and see how you acquire those numbers. So anyway, I'm still in favor of without paying. I don't think that's necessary. Is it because you think that otherwise then they won't stick to it if there's not like the oversight of some kind of audit
Correct.
afterwards?
Correct. That, all the goals that you hope for are sacrificed.
I also had another question about geothermal here, this is one I'm not as familiar with, about what is the affordability and the price range and stuff of it now that we're recommending. That's what I'm not familiar with at all.
So, geothermal, depending on the application, has a payback period of some number of years, 7, 10, 15, 20. Actually, Andy could probably speak more to that. But conventional has no payback period, because that's the baseline. Geothermal for public facilities that are using tax exempt bonds to finance the facility are probably going to get a 25% federal tax rebate. So that's brand new. So geothermal for a public facility just got 25% cheaper. Andy, anything more to that?
Or say it's 30%.
Well, except it's 15 if you're using tax exempt bonds plus the 10% for domestic manufactured equipment. So 25.
And then another 10% for the workforce development.
Maybe 35 then. Somewhere between 15 and
Yeah.
35, we're pretty sure, with the new Inflation Reduction Act.
But so anyway, just confirming that this is not an added expense, that geothermal is a cost saving
It's an added
upfront cost over
Yeah,
time,
exactly.
right?
It's an added expense in the initial capital outlay which has a payback period. It'll pay for it. That added expense will pay for itself.
And there may be other places to get funding as well.
Right. And, when we're talking about 15 to 35% rebate, then it's actually a real question whether there is any added upfront capital expense, excepting, of course, the time frame you have to wait for the rebate check.
And there might be various levels of things that you would get with the geothermal system, whether you have a certain type of heat pump versus if you could make hot water directly. There's all kinds of other things that can be added on. So the price is not a fixed price. There's the other things you can add to it.
So it sounds like based on the discussion, I don't know, can you scroll up on the memo, Scott?
Can I give you a flash drive, Scott?
Okay, so technically what I just wanted to see here is that, so this memo is sort of from Scott to council, and my understanding is that it'll,
This memo's to
Commission.
us.
to us? Oh, okay,
I wrote this memo as a summary of what this commission discussed last meeting, from me to this commission.
okay. And what we're saying, what we're going to do is use this as sort of backup information to the resolution that gets passed on to the city council, is what I'm hearing from the group. We're focused a lot there. So, Scott, do you feel comfortable based on the discussion that we're having here tonight, that you can kind of characterize the discussion and have a version 2 of this memo that sufficiently provides the backup information that we'd like to include along with the resolution? Where are the ports?
Okay, what am I pulling up?
Sorry for the distractions. That first one, if you're interested, this was just a stab at the memo that I took. If we were interested in doing this together, obviously I'll let Scott answer that question, but to my understanding, you know, a staff person usually writes the memo, and it's important for us to vote on the main resolution. Is that true, do you think?
That's typical.
So I think we don't necessarily need to look through this, but if we wanted to have like a group effort on the memo, this was one thing to consider. Otherwise, I think it might be best to, kind of as you mentioned earlier, Stacy, focusing on the resolution part more.
This kind of connects to all my previous thoughts that in some of the whereas, we might want to have the reasons behind some of this and like the cost saving benefits and also kind of how long term we're looking for this building, because I think this information is really important.
I don't disagree. When is all of this going to be decided by city council? I don't want to, I understand, and I do think that some of these cost savings and things are important. What I would like to do is also recognize that the city of Urbana does have, has staff and will purportedly, or I suppose, be talking to architects and things like that. I think that these are sort of finer detailed points that can be worked out in terms of costs and cost savings. I don't think that it's the job per se of the SAC to go ahead and outline all of the background information, including sort of the economics behind these programs. I think that if it's asked for specifically from city council, that they're looking for staff to spend some time on that, and if staff wants to ask us to do the math, then I think that it would be okay. But for getting the point across about supporting these particular technologies at this time for these buildings, I think we're really close to saying and acting in what we're being asked to respond to. But I'd like to hear more from maybe Grace, being on city council, for how long the process is, and it could take a really long time if we had to do more research and come back next month. Or 2 months from now in
Yeah, I was gonna
December.
say our next meeting's not till December.
I don't think there's a good answer for that in general. Public Works has been doing a great job coming with the architect and giving some kind of regular updates and discussions, so it's still very much in discussion in city council. So I can't say that we have a clear timeline, but I think that, you know, there is kind of some looking forward to this recommendation. So I think if possible, you know, now versus in 2 months would be better. I agree that, you know, we don't have to have all the details figured out. They have, you know, also their architects and design construction and people in public works. And the economics piece, I think it is, you know, absolutely great for sure to include that. I think if we're on a time crunch, I don't think that there's like a convincing of these things that we need to convince people that it's worth it necessarily. I think they're looking for the recommendation on what to do rather than do we incorporate sustainability stuff. So in that sense, I don't think that we need to like, make a financial argument about it necessarily.
Yep.
Stacy, I still believe that what we need to say is, as the SAC, we absolutely need to see X, Y, and Z in these buildings.
Okay.
That this is what is necessary. And I think everything else, whether we separate it into like nice and great or just everything else, it's not as important. That we need to be very clear about what we absolutely believe needs to be included. And in my mind, it's just the first 3 bullets under the basic. That's where I'm at right now.
Okay, so can we go to the resolution and bring that back up?
Well, and I think also that the memo, I'm getting confused about the memo, because from SAC, we've always done a resolution but not a memo. So, and then you were talking about the staff person often does a memo, and you've started something, which is helpful, but do we need to do the memo? If we can do the resolution and be done, then we don't have to worry about running out of time and getting off cycle or out of sync with the council's decisions.
I think that makes sense. I don't think I've been a part of an official
been a
resolution
while.
recommendation to council since I've been here, but I imagine that if there are those, that Scott writes a memo and it accompanies that. But I mean, when things come to council, there is a memo and then there's the resolution. So I think even if I agree, it doesn't get made in SAC, but then Scott or the staff person ends up writing the memo.
Okay. Well, I'd like us to agree on what's in the resolution and have that be what we really accomplish today.
There was another one too, when I was just looking at that draft memo that we talked about last month but didn't get written down yet and isn't in here yet, about the old building demolition and reuse, recycling, repurposing of that material. I think that isn't in our resolution yet.
Yeah, and that should be one of the must-haves. It's very straightforward to do.
Okay, I thought that we were focused on the new building and not on demolition.
It's really one project, right? You have to tear down what's there and build up new. Or rip out all the plants and put in a parking lot.
Okay, all right. So, in this resolution, we are currently focused on new construction as a recommendation coming from the SEC. We have not discussed best practices for demolition. We can add it somewhere in here as an additional section.
I don't know that it has to be separate, just the section 1 here, this first sentence.
Okay.
You say recommends that new building design
Mm-hmm.
for local fire stations, all that stuff's important, right? But recommends that the construction of the new local fire stations, and then the rest stays the same. We'll just add another section that says, the Sustainability Advisory Commission recommends that all demolition materials and construction materials that can be recycled or repurposed or reused. There were the 3 R's, but I don't remember what they were. Well, that all materials from the demolition of existing structures and the construction of the new facilities be diverted from the landfill in any way possible to the maximum degree. As a new must. That's top.
Yeah, I think it could go into a section or just another bullet point in that one draft memo, if you were interested in copying and pasting Scott, that had a sentence that was, we recommend that any materials from demolition be reused, recycled, or repurposed whenever possible.
Yeah, and I like that one as the last one, but I would also add, materials from demolition and excess during construction. 'Cause we did zero waste on the Solar Farm 2.0 project, and we're able to get above 90% diverted from the landfill. But there's like, things come on pallets, and you can recycle pallets, and things come wrapped, on cardboard spools, and you can recycle those, things like that.
Yes, I definitely agree. I didn't specifically include that because it's already included in the lead stuff to consider. I was just trying not to get too redundant, but yes, I agree. I think we can definitely include demolition and construction materials.
You could say recommend that any refuse materials if you add after any there, the word refuse, you guys, it's RE.
It's not refuse if you reuse it,
Oh,
so it's just materials.
okay. Well, then
Oh,
how do
okay,
you
so just-
add and during construction?
Any materials from demolition and construction materials.
Excess
be
materials?
Just construction materials.
I guess it works because it says whenever possible, right?
Okay, great. Okay. All right, section 2 changes to section 3. This is where we are, as a basic, adding in geothermal heating and cooling.
So this
Like
says shall.
Right, yeah, recommends
So
that we
then-
shall use geothermal heating and cooling for the
So
new
then in
construction.
section 2, it should say, after the word construction, it should say shall be. Ooh, section
Sorry, it's
2,
backwards.
the added one.
That any materials from demolition and construction shall be. Okay.
And what does as a baseline standard mean? Can we take that phrase out? Is that related to the good, better, best concept?
It really was, so let's take out baseline standard and just say we want to have geothermal be utilized for new construction instead of natural gas.
Do we need to say instead of natural gas?
Scott, what do you think?
It's up to you.
I mean, I want it as an alternative to natural gas fuels in the building, so.
And do you think that they could get a system that would be fully reliable without a natural gas backup?
Yeah, that
The geothermal that we
They
have
don't-
at that, I don't know, I forget the
typically,
size of the building, but at Campus Instructional Facility, it's partial.
at least in residential applications, there's typically a small electric resistance backup heating. Andy, is that also for commercial typical, do you know?
I would think so, unless
So
there's,
so they should be able to do it without natural gas backup.
unless there's a large discrepancy between what the average demand is and the peak. Then you might have to have some other source.
Okay,
Which I wouldn't anticipate in a
Yeah.
building that's basically 24/7, 365, and, occupied by about the same number of people.
okay. I'm comfortable with keeping the instead of natural gas.
Is the the new section 4, solar ready plus battery backup ready design utilized? Acceptable.
I think it's good for me. I think the only thing we lost here was that kind of scale up. So I don't know if there's words for, ready or optimally installed at construction, or if that's something we care about. Like, are we really going for ready, or are we saying that's minimal and having it installed would be best?
I think the ones that are best we could put in the last section under the also consider actually installing solar. You could also consider, if you really wanted to, a green roof under solar panels, which should make the solar more efficient and probably still has enough sunlight for the little plants. I mean, there's definitely the high end of sustainability as well, but I think putting it in the end would work. So these are like, definitely do these, and then also, here's a whole bunch of great other things to do.
So what I like, thanks for that perspective, I think that is important. what I'm sort of considering here as, I realize we're getting rid of as the baseline standard, but what should be included for new construction. I like the idea of the solar ready plus backup ready, meaning that the system can, not the system, the building and the building design can accept these systems at some point in the future. Something I also want to think about is I realize that the land use here for the two different sites are different. And it is entirely plausible in my mind that it is not a rooftop system, at least at one of the sites, and that it could be a ground-mounted system, for example, next to the building. I want to be able to leave that, I'd want to leave that flexibility at this point and see what the designers come up with as far as, you know, their recommendations and where they say, okay, yes, this building will be ready to, you know, accept solar panels or accept a battery bank system at this location, and where they would suggest a ground mount system to go or something like that. Also with the way that it becomes financed or included later on, I believe that there's also, you know, like with geothermal, with solar, there's also going to be these 30% tax credits. I don't know exactly what the right percentage is based on different criteria, but the city will be able to take advantage of that, or they would be able to do something like a power purchase agreement for the system in the future that they may not want to include with the developer at this point. So for simplifying getting the building built, get the building built, we want to make sure that solar can be added later, definitely.
You'll go back to 3, sorry. So I think you can get rid of natural gas, I think, and just say conventional heating and cooling system. Because we were talking about air conditioners too, so.
Okay, so replacing natural gas with, instead of conventional heating and cooling.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe one day geothermal will be conventional.
Someday soon. It's gonna have to be as the natural gas prices keep skyrocketing.
I think this is looking good. I'm curious too when we're ready to scroll down, because I feel like in that last section, I think maybe there's not a consensus on this, but I feel like some of those are more of a baseline thing. I don't know if for me all of those are just additional things.
Which are the items here that you would say are baseline? Is it I know that we talked about shared use, we may want to move that up to a baseline.
Yeah, I think shared use of space and some kind of green building design. And I think we could include those options there, like for example, with LEED, that it's also about, you know, the insulation, the efficiency, the other stuff, that it's not just solar panels and geothermal, but the other aspects of building energy efficiency. So I think for me that would also be one of our basic ones.
I was hoping that in section 1, that covered looking at taking into account health with attention to indoor air quality and filtration and comfort of building occupants through environmental controls, emphasizing energy efficiency and renewable energy through zero net carbon and green building design. So I thought that was captured.
I mean, it can, but
Okay.
I mean, if you're talking about that your basic is you want it full registered LEED basic, I think that's not what this says to me. Section 1 is taking those basic ideas and principles and then additionally getting that, which I am in favor of. I just thought that you were saying differently.
Okay. I think that we've talked around and around about LEED certified or not. I think that there are benefits to the city as a whole to have a city building that is LEED certified. But I do not think that it is cost effective to LEED certify a building. So if you're doing the building itself, I don't think that's the best thing that we should do for a building. If we're trying to promote City of Urbana as we are a sustainable town, we care about sustainability, we have geothermal Urbana-Champaign, solar Urbana-Champaign, all these great things in this community for sustainability, then a LEED certified building has that purpose. It's a marketing technique. I do not think that it is worthwhile as a must-have for our fire stations, and that's my perspective on it. So the section 1 that says, you know, incorporate green building design is enough for me, from my perspective.
Does anyone feel strongly to the opposite, that we have to have a LEED certified design as a baseline for new building construction?
Guess I'm a little confused here. I think that's why I feel comfortable looking back at those like 3 columns that we originally made, because it's hard to take that and put it into this. So I think that it is important to have some sort of a structure of your green building system, because I think it's also to just say green building design without having a real recommendation, what are we talking about? So I think for me, that's why it's helpful to at least point to a few options and give some information on those options. Because I think that it is important to incorporate them. I don't think that paying for the full registration is important, but I would say that, you know, in our columns, our basic one, which is what you had the first 3, so that's also some differences there.
So the number 1, the section 1 on the resolution says incorporate green building design, but it doesn't say specifically get registered. And then in section 5 now, the last one, we're saying, you know, it'd be not, you know, also consider doing these other things, like actually using one of these rating systems, LEED and Passive House or Net Zero. So I think that we're covering, I feel like what's written here is saying what I hear all of us saying, although I'm worried that I'm only hearing myself. Because I'm an Aquarius, and I'm like that. I actually, if I could, away from the LEED side, I don't know what the city building code requirements are for stormwater management. Is there, do you know, Scott?
You know, it's something like capture the first inch of rainfall on site or something like that.
Okay.
I can't remember.
There's a little bit, there's something. It's not, because I don't know, on the campus, our rules are, you know, different. Not that I even know them by heart, but one of these buildings is going where it's a green space, and so the rainwater will be impacted. And I think we could, I don't know if it would add to, if we would actually move that item into a must-have of some kind, like any plants on there should be native plants at a minimum if you're going to have plants. But I don't know if you're going to have plants other than grass. But then as a nice to have, it would be good to say something along the lines of, I'm trying to think of the words. Have no change in stormwater that leaves the property, no additional stormwater leaving the property after the construction of the new facility. That's a nice thing to do.
Yeah, I'd absolutely think we could. I think we encompass a lot of the intent here. I don't know all the ins and outs either, but I do recall that there is a system in public works, especially from a green space to a brown space, and even within gravel versus pavement, or those are the same, but there's other ones. When you go from different types of ground structure, that there is some kind of regulations and formulas that they have for stormwater management displacement.
So it's kind of covered in some fashion by the city codes already.
To
And
the
then-
best of my understanding, that there's been some garage someone wanted to build, and that has been a thing that's come up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, in that
Okay,
case,
so I
think
mean,
it's
so
okay.
Sorry, but, so that is included in section 5, so what I just wasn't sure is if you are saying that you want to make that a must. Because it is included, and then also, right, so there is I'm sorry, I don't have to say it, but we have to comply with the Illinois EPA, and we have a stormwater management program. This is all monitored. So I believe that when this building goes in and the site is gonna get disturbed, is that is going to be addressed. I can't imagine it not having to be addressed.
Okay, that's good enough for me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it will be, and I think what we have here is considered green infrastructure, like a rain garden instead of more of a stormwater drain pipe or something. So I think that the intent here is covered, in my opinion.
All right, are you able to zoom out just a little bit?
All these years. Say again.
Are there, okay.
I want to comment on the shared use item. I think that because Grace pointed out that the two different locations, they don't both have as much open space. I thought they both were 5 acres for some reason. It's bad memory. Or I did not remember correctly. So I'm just curious what you guys think about. Do we want to say it's a must-have when space allows, or just leave it in consider? Because either way, I think we're bringing it to the attention of the council, either way.
Is it gonna be a separate section?
Does anybody want to propose that it becomes a separate section outside of section 5?
I think it could go either way, especially now that I'm just thinking about it, since the word is consider and we're putting it in the like consider thing. I think that also under that logic, it makes sense. But I could see either way. I would be down with a separate section or keeping it in considerations. And, both sites will have some space. It's not like the building will take up the entire lot. So even on the smaller one, there might not be room for a playground, but there could be a little, pocket pollinator garden or something.
So the thing that doesn't make sense is rest of land area. So shared use of property, I don't know, non-built.
Of the-
What am I trying to
it's-
say here?
it's
Of
the
like, of the
open- it's the open
non-built
space.
space, of
It's the
open space. Shared use of
The open
open
space.
space for the following.
And I think you can take out the rest of.
I
just
agree.
Shared use of the open space. Maybe it's open green space, I don't know. Different terminology there.
Okay. I think
Uh,
that's fine.
I think the bullets about the EV charging stations, it shouldn't say the word lot, employee and fleet, EV charging stations.
All right, are there any changes further to this recommendation system before I ask for a motion to approve?
Just a quick one on the charging. If you're interested, the columns we were looking at also had like community charging options, and the optimal one, which I could take or leave, but especially if we're talking about, backup power and emergencies, and that area of town doesn't have charging stuff, as just kind of like the optimal down the road.
What if we change that so that it says at the beginning, EV charging stations, and they could say for employees and city fleet and community members, because it's all under consider,
Mhm.
and the public, because it'd be visitors and the community if it was a public charging station. So take the employee and fleet and stick it at the end, so it starts with EV charging stations. And then say for employees, yeah, employees and fleet, city vehicles, city fleet, whatever, and the public.
I don't know if we want to add just like a, you know, and possibly public also, because for me, I feel like that's kind of a little further down the road. Like I'd rather have it for employees, for fleet vehicles, and then optimal or down the road for community or public vehicles.
Sorry, it looks captured. EV charging stations for employees, fleet, and public vehicles.
I think it doesn't matter if we say
Okay.
like sort of the order that you're talking about, because it's all in consideration, right?
Okay.
And really, right now, the city doesn't have electric vehicles that I know of. Do you? There's one. Is it plug-in? Yeah, okay. So, never mind. Just that public already have electric vehicles, is what I was saying. So maybe that comes first because there are some.
But also pushing towards the city, because we only have one city charging spot too, right? So,
We just bought some on campus, and we're gonna get more. You should do it too.
Okay, so the font of shared use of open space, community gardens, and playground does not match the font of the other text around it.
I was just gonna
Sorry,
comment,
where at?
Grace, about your,
Well, just do
last
this.
time you're talking about fire trucks. And I just saw an ad, they were saying that LA has the first electric fire truck.
What? What did you just do?
I don't know if you guys
Oh, God.
watched, when this was discussed last time at city council, Scott sent that meeting notice. They're all recorded, so if you're interested, you could, take a look at some of those other recent conversations with the fire department and the architects and city council. And we did talk about the vehicles a little bit, some more, and, they're adamant on the fire truck usage. But there may be some things changing with our ambulance system that would impact, you know, reducing their number of medical calls, hopefully.
All right, can we go to the top and just do a quick read through from the whereases sections? And if there's anything that's major that is standing out right now, that we can make that change at this point. And then again, I would like to call on folks to consider making a motion to pass the resolution.
For the IRA, I think it makes municipals eligible for a 25% direct payment.
What do we decide, Andy? 15 to 35%, depending on circumstances?
Not that 40%
one.
lower down.
Sorry. Oh, here it is.
Say up to 35%?
Sorry, Luke, I was mistaken. Restate what you said, because I was looking at the wrong thing.
For the top bullet point right now on the screen,
Mhm.
it should be eligible for A.
Ah, gotcha.
And is there a change to the 25%? Andy, does that
Yeah.
need to change?
I don't know what number it should be, so.
It's-
Okay.
Mm.
Maybe up to 50%. That covers you. For,
I don't want to overpromise, though.
I think that in the last whereas, before now therefore be it resolved, I don't think it needs to say and now therefore be it resolved. Do we get rid of that and?
maybe say for at least 25%?
This right here? It's not a period?
See, because whereas is not actually a sentence. Whereas my name's Morgan is not a sentence.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Andy had made also a recommended change back around the 25%. He said include a word. What was that word?
For at least,
For at least.
What was the third potential incentive?
it's like a workforce incentive,
Was it
it's 10%.
10%? How about this? We'll just list them all. Or we'll not list any of them and say 10 to 35%.
That's why I was saying at least 25%, then you don't have to say what the range is.
It's not guaranteed.
No.
I don't know. Whatever you guys think.
I think 10 to 35 gives a good range unless you want to include more of the details. I think that would be helpful, and it wouldn't hurt to have as like a little link or attachment in the memo on some of that information for, you know, if they're moving forward with this, how to apply for the rebates and all that.
Actually, the minimum is 6%.
Okay.
All right, we don't want to make this worse.
I'm just saying
I-
if nothing else,
Okay.
no other incentives, it would be 6%.
What if we don't say the percent there, just say eligible for a direct payment? Now the IRA makes municipalities eligible for a direct
Direct.
payment for renewable energy generation systems.
Including geothermal.
Yeah, keep through the parentheses there. Undo.
But then I have to add the other. yet
No.
another-
So we're just saying the Inflation Reduction Act now makes municipalities eligible for a direct payment from the U.S. Treasury for renewable energy generation systems, including geothermal, period. Semicolon.
I was gonna say, you mean semicolon.
Okay.
So the word generation doesn't make sense because you're not, geothermal, you're not generating like,
Yeah, I agree. Take out the word generation.
if you're putting in solar, then that's fine.
Okay. Somebody please make a motion. I
Well,
don't know as chair if
we
I
We finished
can.
scrolling down.
We were reading the whole thing, but we didn't get to the end.
Oh, I thought we were
So we got to the
already
now,
covered on all
therefore,
of
right?
the. Okay.
Now this is the important stuff here. Can we just scroll through this?
Sure.
We ready to scroll down more?
Is native-var a word?
It's
Yes.
it's in common usage. I don't know if it's in the dictionary.
Actually, it's more appropriate to say indigenous plant selection than to say native. So could we change that to indigenous plants? Anyone have a concern about that?
I don't have any concerns about that. Just change it to indigenous plant
Is
selections.
a native var an indigenous plant?
I don't know. I was just gonna say yes, but I don't know. I still believe that indigenous plants is the appropriate thing to say here.
It's up to you.
I'm fine with either way. Indigenous is fine. Are you saying because native are similar to native but not actually
A native
indigenous to the area?
A native is a horticultural cultivar of a native species. So a purple coneflower is a native species, if a horticultural facility, cultivates that into a dramatically shorter stature, purple coneflower or a purple coneflower, a different, shade of purple or something, that would be a nativar, a native cultivar.
I'm sorry, I don't actually want to propose changing the language. I just didn't know what that word meant. Thank you.
Just scroll to the bottom, please.
Okay, consideration for one more bullet point if we wanted to add another bullet point for installation of solar panels and battery, because so far we only have ready.
I agree.
Do you want to say as part of the initial construction or something like that?
Okay, and then last thing, the bullet point above that, do we want to take out the parentheses and just say open space for community gardens, playgrounds, et cetera?
I move to pass this resolution and go home soon.
I second.
Okay, I believe we do need to take a vote on this, and will staff call, wait, do we need to do a staff roll call for passing a resolution?
I think now that we're back to the old meetings, we can do a voice vote.
Okay,
All in favor kind of thing.
so we'll do a voice vote for this. All in favor of passing the SAC resolution for green construction for fire stations as amended on this 4th day of October 2022, say aye. Aye. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Scott, please save this. The rest of the agenda for this evening includes, or included, I have to get back to it. Pumpkin Smash at Landscape Recycling Center and Inflation Reduction Act discussion. I propose that we move the Inflation Reduction Act discussion to the December meeting. Since that's a motion, any seconds? Great. All in favor of moving the Inflation Reduction Act discussion to December, say aye.
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 Sorry, who moved that? Andy moved. Who seconded? Can you move a motion?
I don't know.
I don't think the chair can.
Sorry.
I move to move the Inflation Reduction Act discussion to next meeting, December.
Thank you.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Pumpkin Smash at Landscape Recycling Center.
We should keep that on the agenda because
I
December
feel
will be
like because
after it.
December is after, so it's not my agenda item. I'm waiting. Okay, so what I think is going on is that we're waiting to put the flyer up on the screen. And then I'm hoping that either Scott or Grace will present about the Pumpkin Smash at the Landscape Recycling Center. I can start speaking about it. It sounds like it is an event that will be held on November 5th, 2022 from 11 to 3. It is a free event for the community to visit the Landscape Recycling Center in Urbana and smash your pumpkins in our food scrap compost pile, and to also learn about local compost and organics recycling in our community. This sounds like it is going to be a very fun event, and I hope that a lot of families turn out. Grace, would you like to say any more about it? I don't know, I thought you were maybe working on planning it, which is why I'm asking you.
Yes, Scott and I have this brainchild of quite a few people. I think you even, Stacy, brought this up at some time last year, talking about compost, and also with CCES, the Champaign County Environmental Stewards nonprofit. So the idea here would be pumpkin smash to get people out to the Landscape Recycling Center, learn little bit more about what they do and get familiar with it, get hooked on it, I think as Scott says. Once people come out, then they want to keep coming back for local mulch and compost, and highlight our food scrap composting pilot project so people can get more information. And so the idea would be have this day event, people can come out, smash their pumpkins, take a picture and selfie and whatnot, and that we would have some volunteers with kind of booths and information or possibly goodies from Champaign County Environmental Stewards to do kind of a table tent setup, and then from SAC also, if there's interest in manpower to do that, then we could have a table as well and do some community engagement and be part of the pumpkin smash stuff.
Cool. Is there anything that you need from the SAC for this event?
I think day of is the main thing. Also, I'm happy to have feedback on flyers, events, activities that happen that day within the confines of what's reasonable at the LRC. I think the biggest thing would be day of, coming to volunteer, and also if there's any other things that we wanted to give out. We had talked about, brochures or flyers, pamphlets. It sounds like Scott's got some for the LRC that we could give out and kind of the city end. But I think it would also be a good time just to have conversations with people as they come through and to learn more about our organization.
On the flyers, assuming that this is a partnership with Urbana and CCES, maybe putting the Urbana logo.
I actually just told Grace she could remove the Urbana logo to make room for other things. It's really the Landscape Recycling Center, which is kind of its own entity. So if there was any logo to squeeze in there, I'd say the Landscape Recycling Center logo, which I can provide. But it's,
There's a typo on the one that is labeled number 2 in the name of Landscape Recycling Center. Doesn't have a D. We have a new full-time zero waste coordinator for the university, Daphne Hulse, and she can be reached at recycling@illinois.edu, and she can help spread, if you send her these flyers, she can help share that throughout the campus, and campus sustainability avenues. And if you're seeking additional volunteers, she could also try to connect with some of the students. She's been here about a month now.
Since I know a lot of students don't have vehicles, I almost hate to ask this. Do you think it would be possible to make like a pumpkin drop-off point on campus for students, and then all the pumpkins could be taken to
I
the
don't
LRC?
think a lot of,
I don't know if
I
this
don't think
is.
a lot of the on-campus residents have their own jack-o'-lanterns.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a good point. I think maybe we look at that in a future year. But perhaps some volunteers would like to do like a bring out your dead kind of pumpkin jack-o'-lantern gathering with some sort of pickup truck. Like the Ford Lightning that we're very proud of.
So would anyone be available or interested to come out that Saturday, I think is the question, because we're thinking that this would be somewhat not a huge event because of limited space and parking at the LRC. So the idea is that people would have kind of a drive-through thing, get a tour of the loop of, you know, just driving through the landscape recycling center on their own. They make it to the compost bin, smash their pumpkin, talk to people, maybe get some free candy or something, and then be on their way. So I think ideally we're not looking at like a huge number of hundreds of thousands of people, and we're not looking at a huge number of volunteers. So I mean, I think if we have a handful of people from SAC and a handful of people from CCES, that would be covered. So I guess that's kind of the first question before we need to find out if we need to seek other volunteers, is if we have enough in-house.
I could do like an hour of it, but I couldn't do 4 hours.
Yeah, and I think I can volunteer as well. Maybe not for the whole time.
I can do 2 hours.
I'm out of town. Sorry.
Yeah, that thing that totally makes sense, and we can, you know, have a little sign-up sheet or something closer to time so we could figure out what hours people are there and make sure it's covered. So I think that'll be fine. So just good to know that there's some interest and availability.
Do we want to ask any of the student environmental organizations for volunteers or let them know about the event? I don't know.
I think sure. I think the idea was that we were going to, you know, broadcast this event, advertise it. Some of these ones we're looking at now would be for more digital stuff for like Facebook or email sharing, and then the other one for printing out a few copies at like the library and other places like that. So, I mean, I think, yes, the idea is for it to be advertised. I don't have connections to student environmental groups necessarily, but sure, we can send it along, and if they're interested. We don't have a contact on here. Could we throw your email on at least one of these versions or something?
And then also, I hear there's going to be a recycling table at Green Quad Day on October 13th. Could we have like these flyers at Green Quad Day?
Absolutely.
I think like one, yes. We were thinking of printing like 20 copies total.
Well, you give us the files, we'll print one.
Okay.
Tape it to the tablecloth.
Yeah, I think that would be great. So I think we can send out a round of these finalized promotional stuff to share throughout your networks would be awesome. And again, we're trying to keep it somewhat not huge, so I don't think that'll be a problem, but we're not necessarily trying to get out like, you know, half of the student population in big buses at the LRC is not necessarily the goal, but having people kind of come through and do it in hopefully a staggered, reasonable rate that we can get everyone in and out safely and quickly.
Okay, this sounds great. Are there any other questions or comments on these flyers or about the event?
I'd also just add a last plug that about the pilot project, that we're still also looking for commercial food waste generators with pre-consumer food waste that doesn't have contaminants like plastic forks and other things like that in it. So also to share throughout your networks or anyone listening to the meeting that we're also interested in more grocery stores, restaurants, things like that to partner in this pilot project. And we do have a hauler that is licensed or permitted within the city of Urbana, and it's not exclusive. We're also interested in expanding that to other haulers. We just haven't found other interested ones yet.
Morgan?
Is there a place where the groups that are involved get listed like on a website? So the folks, would you say pre-consumer food waste suppliers, or the waste suppliers, are they on the city website so there's recognition of what they're doing, or do we give them even like a sign for their window? I think we talked about probably 2 or 3 years ago. I know I was still at my house on Zoom with you, that there was, you know, some way to acknowledge their participation so that they get recognition from their potential customers and others.
Yeah, I don't think we do with the city. What we've been recommending people is through the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition, and that's where they can get a membership, I think, for free, and get the decal on the window, and there's different levels depending on what they compost and stuff like that. So I think we're relying mostly on that external statewide recognized structure instead of having our own, like, list of
Yeah,
Urbana
no,
few
that's great that there's
businesses.
one to connect to. That's great.
All right, any last announcements? Cool, all right. With no further business before the commission this evening, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and see you in December.